Happy Monday, everybody. Welcome to Quarantine Storytime. I'm Charlotte. We're reading War and Peace. And before we get started, I just want to say something that's been kind of bothering me. However I put this is going to sound dumb because it is. But I just wanted to say that I stand with Black lives and that Black lives matter and that America needs to keep treating all of its citizens equally, regardless of skin tone, background, race, ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation, however you want to categorize or put people into boxes, it's not important. And all lives matter. No. All people need to be treated equally. And I just want to say that Black lives matter and stand with friends and family who have to face racism every day. And I'm putting this horribly because I'm dumb sometimes. But I just want for all my friends and family of any different race or religion, I just want you to know that I love and support you and will fight for you. And also, if there's a media blackout at some point in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter protesters, we will be observing that on this channel. So if I find out exactly when that is, I will let you know that we'll be skipping a day that day. I would just want to remember all the lives that have been lost around America, not just in the last few weeks, not just in the last few years, but in decades of oppression. And we can all read history and, want to be informed, but if it doesn't change how you act, it doesn't matter. So yeah. And so I feel weird just segueing into War and Peace, but I just wanted to make sure that I took time on one of the only public platforms I use that much to make that clear. And if that's a problem with anyone, you don't have to follow along. That's fine. I just hope that at some point we can all acknowledge that our differences make us better and not one better than the other. America, get it together, America. But yeah, no, this is for friends, family, people I don't know, families who are grieving right now, and rightfully so. So that's today's long reading is dedicated to them. We are going to read Volume 2, Part 1, and Sections 8 through 12 today. Hopefully we can get moving along, get some more done, hopefully. Last thing that was happening was sort of the Petersburg drama, Pierre's duel, where he may have killed Dolokhov, separating from his wife, giving him his fortune. And Bald Hills, where they have not told Andrei Bolkonsky's wife that he's probably dead. They're waiting until she has the baby. So that's where we're at. Hey! Lisa's in the live chat. I do have the live chat up, so feel free to say hi if you like. And we're just going to jump in now. Ma bonne amie, the little princess said on the morning of the 19th of March, and her mustached little lip rose by old habit. But ever since the day the terrible news had been received, there had been sorrow not only in the smiles, but in the sounds of talk, even in the footsteps in that house. So now the smile of the little princess, who had succumbed to the general mood, though she did not know its cause, was such that it was all the more a reminder of the general sorrow. Ma bonne amie, je crains qu'elle frustique, comme de dites phoques à the cook. De ce matin ne m'a pas fait de mal. What's the matter, darling? You're pale. Ah, you're very pale, Princess Marya said fearfully, rushing to her sister-in-law with her heavy, soft steps. Your Excellency, shouldn't we send for Marya Bogdanova? Asked one of the maids. Marya Bogdanova was a midwife from the provincial capital who had already been living at Bald Hills for over a week. Indeed, Princess Marya picked up. You may be right. I'll go. Courage, mon ange. She kissed Lisa and was about to leave the room. Ah, no, no! And besides the paleness, the face of the little princess showed a childish fear of unavoidable physical suffering. Non, c'est l'estomac. Dites quel est l'estomac. Dites, Marie, dites. And the princess wept with a capricious child's suffering, even shamming somewhat, wringing her little hands. The princess ran out of the room to fetch Marya Bogdanova. Oh, mon Dieu, she heard behind her. The midwife was already coming to meet her, with a significantly calm face, rubbing her small, plump white hands. Marya Bogdanova, it seems it's begun, said Princess Marya, looking at the midwife with frightened, wide-open eyes. Well, thank God, Princess, Marya Bogdanova said, without quickening her pace. You young girls oughtn't to know about these things. But the doctor hasn't come from Moscow yet, said the princess. At the wishes of Lisa and Prince Andrei, they had sent to Moscow in due time for an accoucheur, and he was expected at any moment. Never mind, Princess, don't worry, said Marya Bogdanova. Everything will be fine without the doctor. 5 minutes later, in her rooms, the princess heard something heavy being carried. She peeked out. The servants were for some reason carrying a leather sofa that had been in Prince Andrei's study. There was something solemn and quiet in the carriers' faces. Princess Marya sat alone in her room, listening to the noises in the house, opening her door from time to time when someone passed by, and watching over what was happening in the corridor. Several women passed back and forth there with soft steps, glanced at the princess and turned away from her. She did not dare ask anything, closed her door and returned to her room, and now sat in her armchair, now took her prayer book, and now knelt before the icons. Unfortunately, and to her astonishment, she felt the prayer did not calm her agitation. Suddenly the door to her room opened quietly, and her old nanny, Prashkovya Savishna, who has hardly ever came to her room, because the old prince forbade it, appeared in the doorway, her head bowed with a kerchief. I've come to sit with you, Mashenka, said the nanny, and here I've brought the prince's wedding candles to light before the saint, my angel, she said, sighing. Ah, I'm so glad, Nanny. God is merciful, dear heart. The nanny lit the gold-decorated candles in front of the icon stand and sat down by the door with her knitting. Princess Marya took a book and began to read. Only when steps or voices were heard, they looked at each other, the princess fearfully, questioningly, and the nanny soothingly. The same feeling that Princess Marya was experiencing as she sat in her room came over everyone and spread to all ends of the house, following the belief that the less people know about the suffering of a woman in labor, the less she suffers. Everyone tried to pretend that they knew nothing. No one spoke of it, but apart from the usual staidness and respectfulness of good manners that prevailed in the prince's house, one could see a sort of general concern, a softness of heart, and the awareness of something great, inconceivable, that was being accomplished at that moment. No laughter was heard in the big maid's room. In the footmen's quarters, the men were all sat silently, ready for something. The caretakers did not sleep and had splinters and candles burning. The old prince paced his study, stepping on his heels, and sent Tikhon to Marya Bogdanova to ask what news. Just say the prince told me to ask what news, and come and tell me what she says. Tell the prince that the labor has begun, said Marya Bogdanova, glancing significantly at the messenger. Tikhon went and told him. Very well, said the prince, closing the door behind him, and Tikhon did not hear the least sound from the study after that. A little later, Tikhon went into the study as if to tend to the candles. Seeing the prince lying on the sofa, Tikhon looked at him, at his upset face, shook his head, silently went over to him, kissed him on the shoulder, and went out without tending to the candles or saying why he had come. The mystery, the most solemn in the world, continued to be accomplished. Evening passed, night came, and the feeling of expectation and of the heart's softness before the inconceivable did not diminish, but heightened. No one slept. It was one of those March nights where it is as if winter wants to claim its own back, and with desperate malice pours out its last snows and storms. The German doctor from Moscow was expected any moment. A carriage had been sent for him to the turning from the highway to the country road, and mounted men with lanterns went to lead him along the bumpy and muddy road. Princess Marya had long ago abandoned her book. She was sitting quietly, her luminous eyes fixed on her nanny's wrinkled face, familiar to her in the smallest detail, on the lock of gray hair that strayed from under her kerchief, at the little pouch of skin that hung under her chin. The nanny, Savishna, holding her knitting, was telling it in a low voice, herself not hearing or understanding the words, the story she had told 100 times of how the late princess had given birth to Princess Marya in Kishinev, when with a Moldovan peasant woman instead of a midwife. With God's mercy, there's no need for any doctors, she said. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew open the poorly latched windows. At the prince's behest, with the coming of the larks, one frame of the double windows was removed in each room, and sent the heavy silk curtain fluttering, blew in cold and snow, and put out the candle. Princess Marya shuddered. The nanny set her knitting down, went to the window, leaned out, and snatched at the open window frame. Cold wind blew about the ends of her kerchief and her stray locks of gray hair. Princess, dearest, somebody's driving down the avenue, she said, holding the frame and not closing it, with lanterns. Must be the doctor. Ah, my God, thank God, said Princess Marya. I must go and meet him. He doesn't know Russian. Princess Marya threw on her shawl and ran to meet the arrivals. As she went down the hall, she saw through the window a carriage with lanterns standing by the porch. She went out to the stairs. A tallow candle stood on a baluster, melting in the window. The servant, Philip, with an alarmed face and holding another candle, stood below on the first step of the landing of the stairs. Still lower, around the turn of the stairs, footsteps in warm boots could be heard, and a voice that seemed familiar to Princess Marya was saying something. Thank God, said the voice. And father? Gone to bed, replied the voice of the butler, Demyan, who was already downstairs. Then the voice said something else. Demyan made some reply, and the footsteps in the warm boots began to approach more quickly, the invisible turning of the stair. It's Andrei, thought Princess Marya. No, it can't be. It would be too extraordinary, she thought. And the moment she thought it, the face and figure of Prince Andrei, in a fur coat with a snow-sprinkled collar, appeared on the landing where the servant stood with the candle. Yes, it was he, but pale and thin, with a changed, strangely softened but anxious expression on his face. He came up the stairs and embraced his sister. You didn't get my letter? He asked, and not waiting for an answer, which he would not have received because the princess was unable to speak, he went back, and together with the accoucheur who had come in behind him, they had met at the last posting station, came upstairs again with quick steps, and again embraced his sister. What fate, he said. Masha, dear, and throwing off his fur coat and boots, he went to his wife's rooms. Wow. Section 9. The little princess lay propped up on pillows in a white cap. Her suffering had just eased. Locks of her black hair curled around her inflamed, sweaty cheeks. Her rosy, lovely little mouth with its little lip covered with its fine black hairs was open, and she was smiling joyfully. Prince Andrei came into the room and stopped before her, at the foot of the sofa on which she was lying. Her glittering eyes, looking childishly frightened and anxious, rested on him without changing expression. I love you all. I did no harm to anyone. Why am I suffering? Help me, her expression said. She saw her husband, but did not understand the meaning of his appearance before her. Prince Andrei went around the sofa and kissed her on the forehead. My darling, he spoke words he had never said to her before. God is merciful. She looked at him questioningly with childlike reproach. I expected help from you, and there's nothing. You too, said her eyes. She was not surprised that he had come. She did not understand that he had come. His coming had no relation to her suffering and its relief. The pain started again, and Marya Bogdanova advised Prince Andrei to leave the room. The accoucheur came in. Prince Andrei left, and meeting Princess Marya, went up to her again. They spoke in whispers, but the conversation stopped every other minute. They waited and listened. Allez, mon ami, said Princess Marya. Prince Andrei went to his wife again and sat in the next room waiting. Some woman came out of the room with a frightened face and became embarrassed on seeing Prince Andrei. He covered his face with his hands and sat that way for several minutes. Pitiful, helplessly animal moans came from behind the door. Prince Andrei got up, went to the door, and wanted to open it. Someone was holding the door. You mustn't, a frightened voice said from inside. He started pacing the rooms. The cries ceased. Another few seconds went by. Suddenly a terrible cry, not her cry, she could not cry like that, came from the next room. Prince Andrei rushed to the door. The cry ceased, but another cry was heard, a baby's cry. Why did they bring a baby there, was Prince Andrei's first thought. A baby? What baby? Why is he there? Or has a baby been born? When he suddenly realized all the joyful meaning of that cry, tears choked him, and leaning Both elbows on the windowsill, he wept, sobbing as children weep. The door opened. The doctor, his shirt sleeves rolled up without his frock coat, pale, his jaw trembling, came out of the room. Prince Andrei turned to him, but the doctor gave him a bewildered look and passed by without saying a word. A woman ran out, and seeing Prince Andrei, hesitated in the doorway. He went into his wife's room. She lay dead in the same position in which he had seen her 5 minutes before, and despite her still eyes and pale cheeks, there was the same expression on that lovely, timid, childish face, with its lip covered with fine black hair. I loved you all and did nothing bad to anybody, and what have you done to me? Ah, what have you done to me? Said her lovely, pitiful, dead face. In the corner, something small and red snorted and squealed in Marya Bogdanova's white, trembling hands. 2 hours after that, Prince Andrei went into his father's study with quiet steps. The old man already knew everything. He was standing just by the door, and as soon as it opened, the old man silently embraced his son's neck with his old, tough arms, as in a vice, and burst into sobs like a child. 3 days later, the funeral service was held for the little princess, and in bidding farewell to her, Prince Andrei went up the steps to the coffin. She had the same face in the coffin, though her eyes were closed. Ah, what have you done to me? It kept saying. And Prince Andrei felt something snapped in his soul, and that he was to blame for something he could neither set right nor forget. He was unable to weep. The old man also came and kissed her waxen little hand, which lay calmly over the other hand, and to him her face also said, Ah, what is it that you have done to me, and why? And the old man turned angrily away on seeing that face. After another 5 days, the young Prince Nikolai Andreich was baptized. The foster mother held the swaddling clothes up with her chin, while the priest anointed the boy's wrinkled red palms and feet with a goose feather. The godfather, his grandfather, in fear of dropping him, shook as he carried the infant around the dented tin baptismal font and then handed him to his godmother, Princess Marya. Prince Andrei, his heart sinking for fear that they would drown the baby, sat in another room, waiting for the sacrament to be over. He looked joyfully at the baby when the nanny brought him out to him, and nodded approvingly when the nanny told him that. When thrown into the font, the piece of wax with the baby's hair had not sunk but had floated in the font. Section 10. Rostov's participation in the duel between Dolokhov and Bezukhov was hushed up through the efforts of the old count, and Rostov, instead of being demoted as he expected, was appointed adjutant to the Governor-General of Moscow. As a result of that, he could not go to the country with the whole family, but remain in Moscow all summer with his new duties. Dolokhov recovered, and Rostov became especially close to him during the time of his convalescence. Dolokhov lay ill at his mother's, who loved him passionately and tenderly. Old Marya Ivanovna came to love Rostov for his friendship with Fedya, and often spoke with him about her son. Yes, Count, she used to say, he is too noble and pure-hearted for the depraved world of our time. No one loves virtue. It's a sty in everyone's eye. Now tell me, Count, was it fair? Was it honest on Bezukhov's part? Yet Fedya, in his nobility, loved him and never says anything bad about him even now. All that mischief with the policemen in Petersburg. Some sort of fool's play. Didn't they do it together? Why, nothing happened to Bezukhov, and Fedya had to bear it all on his shoulders. He's had to bear so much. Suppose they did restore him. But how could they not? I don't think there are so many brave sons of the fatherland like him there. And now, this duel. Do these people have any feeling, any honor to challenge him to a duel, knowing he's an only son, and shoot straight at him? It's a good thing God was merciful to us. And for what? Who in our time doesn't have love affairs? Why, if he was so jealous, I can understand. Then he should have let him feel it sooner. But no, it lasted a whole year, and so he challenged him to a duel, assuming that Fedya wouldn't fight because he owed him money. How mean, how vile. I know you've understood Fedya, my dear Count. That's why I love you from the heart. Believe me, few people understand him. He's such a lofty, heavenly soul. Dolokhov himself, during his convalescence, often spoke such words to Rostov as he could never have expected from him. People consider me a wicked man, I know, he used to say. And let them. I don't care what anyone expects, except those I love. And those I love so much that I'd give my life for them, and the rest I'd crush if they stood in my way. I have an adored, priceless mother, 2 or 3 friends, you among them. And to the rest I pay attention only insofar as they're useful or harmful. And almost all of them are harmful, especially women. Yes, my dear heart, he went on, I have met loving, noble, lofty men, but I have never yet met any women who weren't bought, whether countesses or kitchen maids. I have never yet met that heavenly purity and faithfulness that I seek in a woman. If I had ever found such a woman, I would have given my life for her, but these, he made a gesture of contempt. And believe me, if I still value my life, it's only because I still hope to meet the heavenly being who will resurrect, purify, and elevate me. But you don't understand that. No, I understand very well, replied Rostov, who was under the influence of his new friend. In the fall, the Rostov family returned to Moscow. At the beginning of winter, Denisov also returned and stayed with the Rostovs. This early winter time of 1806 that Nikolai Rostov spent in Moscow was one of the happiest and merriest for him and his whole family. Nikolai attracted many young men to his parents' house. Vera was a beautiful 20-year-old girl, Sonia a 16-year-old with all the loveliness of a just-opened flower. Natasha, half young lady, half child, now childishly funny, now girlishly bewitching. At that time there was a special atmosphere of amorousness in the Rostovs' house, as happens in a house where there are very nice and very young girls. Every young man who came to the Rostovs' house looking at these young, susceptible, girlish faces, always smiling at something, probably their own happiness, at this lively rushing about, listening to this young female babble, incoherent, but affectionate towards everyone, ready for anything, filled with hope, listening to these incoherent noises, now of singing, now of music, experienced the same feeling of readiness for love and expectation of happiness that these young people of the Rostovs' house themselves experienced. Among the young men introduced by Rostov, one of the first was Dolokhov, whom everyone in the house liked with the exception of Natasha. She almost quarreled with her brother over Dolokhov. She insisted that he was a wicked man, that in his duel with Bezukhov, Pierre had been right and Dolokhov wrong, and that he was unpleasant and unnatural. There's nothing for me to understand, Natasha cried, with stubborn willfulness. He's wicked and unfeeling. I do like your Denisov, and he's a carouser and all that, but even so I like him, which means I understand. I don't know how to tell you. He has it all calculated. I don't like that. But Denisov, well, Denisov's something else, replied Nikolai, making it clear that, compared with Dolokhov, even Denisov was nothing. You should understand what a soul Dolokhov has. You should see him with his mother. He has such a heart. Well, that I don't know, but I feel awkward with him. And do you know that he's in love with Sonia? What silliness. I'm certain you'll see. Natasha's prediction was proving true. Dolokhov, who did not like the society of women, began to frequent their house, and the question of whom he was doing it for was soon resolved, though no one spoke of it, in the sense that he was doing it for Sonia, and Sonia knew it, though she would never have dared to say it, and she flushed crimson every time Dolokhov appeared. Dolokhov dined frequently with the Rostovs, never missed a play when they went, and attended the balls for adolescents at Iagels, where the Rostovs always went. He paid most attention to Sonia and looked at her with such eyes that not only was she unable to endure that gaze without turning red, but even the old countess and Natasha blushed when they noticed it. It was clear that this strong, strange man was under the irresistible influence produced on him by this dark-haired, graceful girl who loved another. Rostov noticed something new between Dolokhov and Sonia, but he did not define for himself what these new relations were. They're all in love with somebody, he thought, about Sonia and Natasha, but he now felt less at ease with Sonia and Dolokhov, and began to stay away from home more often. With the fall of 1806, everyone again began talking about war with Napoleon, with still greater ardor than the previous year. A recruitment was announced, not only of 10 recruits, but of another 9 fighting men per 1,000. Bonapartus was anathematized everywhere, and around Moscow the only talk was of the impending war. For the Rostov family, all the interest of these preparations for war consisted only in the fact that Nikolushka absolutely refused to remain in Moscow and was simply waiting for the end of Denisov's leave in order to go with him to their regiment after the holidays. The impending departure not only did not hinder his merrymaking, but even encouraged it. He spent most of the time away from home at dinners, evening parties, and balls. Section 11. On the 3rd day of Christmas, Nikolai dined at home, which had rarely happened with him recently. This was an official farewell dinner, because he and Denisov would be leaving with their regiment after Epiphany. There were some 20 guests at dinner, Dolokhov and Denisov among them. Never had the amorous air in the Rostovs' house, the atmosphere of being in love, manifested itself so strongly as during these festive days. Seize the moment of happiness. Make them love you. Fall in love yourself. That is the only real thing in the world. The rest is all nonsense. And that is the one thing we've taken up with here, said this atmosphere. Nikolai, as always, having exhausted 2 pairs of horses and still not having managed to get to all the places he has to go and to which he has been invited, came home just before dinner. As soon as he came in, he noticed and felt the intensity of the amorous atmosphere in the house. But besides that, he noticed a strange perplexity prevailing among certain members of the company. Sonia, Dolokhov, and the old countess were especially perplexed, and Natasha somewhat. Nikolai realized that something must have happened before dinner between Sonia and Dolokhov, and with a sensitivity of heart all his own, he treated them both very delicately and carefully during dinner. That same evening of the 3rd day of the feast of one of those balls was to take place that Iagel, a dancing master, gave during the holidays for all his pupils, boys and girls. Will you go to Iagel's, Nikolenka? Please do, Natasha said to him. He has asked you specially, and Vasily Dmitrich, that is Denisov, is going. I'll go anywhere the Countess orders me to go, said Denisov, who had jokingly placed himself on the footing of Natasha's night in the Rostovs' house. I am ready to dance the pas de châle. If I have time, I promise to go to the Arkharov's soiree, said Nikolai. And you? He turned to Dolokhov, and as soon as he asked it, he noticed that he should not have asked. Yes, perhaps, Dolokhov answered coldly and angrily, glancing at Sonia, and frowning, he glanced at Nikolai exactly as he had looked at Pierre during the club dinner. There's something here, thought Nikolai, and still more convinced of his conjecture by Dolokhov's departure right after dinner, he called Natasha out and asked what it was. And I've been looking for you, said Natasha, running out to him. I kept saying it, and you refused to believe me, she said triumphantly. He proposed to Sonia. Little as Nikolai had been occupied with Sonia during that time, it was as if something snapped in him when he heard it. Dolokhov was a decent and in some respects a brilliant match for the dowerless orphan Sonia. From the point of view of the old countess and of society, it was impossible to refuse him, and therefore Nikolai's first feeling when he heard it was anger at Sonia. He was preparing to say, Splendid, and of course she must forget her childish promises and expect the proposal, but before he had time to say it, can't you imagine, she refused him altogether, said Natasha. She said she loved another, she added after a brief pause. Yes, my Sonia couldn't have acted otherwise, thought Nikolai. No matter how much Mamma begged her, she refused, and I know she won't change once she said something. And Mamma begged her, said Nikolai with reproach. Yes, said Natasha. You see, Nikolenka, don't be angry, but I know you won't marry her. I know, God knows how, but I know for certain that you won't marry her. Well, that you really can't know, said Nikolai, but I must speak with her. What a delight this Sonia is, he added, smiling. She is a delight. I'll send her to you. And Natasha, having kissed her brother, ran off. A moment later, Sonia came in, frightened, bewildered, and guilty. Nikolai went up to her and kissed her hand. It was the first time during his visit that they spoke alone and about their love. Sophie, he said, timidly at first, then more and more boldly, if you want to refuse not only a brilliant match, but an advantageous match, but he's a wonderful, noble man, and he's my friend. Sonia interrupted him. I've already refused, she said hurriedly. If you refuse for my sake, I'm afraid Sonia interrupted him again. She looked at him pleadingly, with a pleading, frightened gaze. Nicholas, don't say that to me, she said. No, I must. It must be suffisance on my part, but it's still better to say anything. Sorry. No, I must. Maybe it's suffisance, presumptuousness on my part, but it's still better to say everything. If you refuse for my sake, I must tell you the whole truth. I love you, I think, more than anyone. That's enough for me, Sonia said, blushing. No, but I have fallen in love and will fall in love 1,000 times, though I have no such feeling of friendship, trust, and love for anyone but you. Besides, I'm young. Maman doesn't want it. Well, simply, I don't promise anything, and I ask you to think about Dolokhov's proposal, he said, speaking his friend's name with difficulty. Don't say that to me. I don't want anything. I love you as a brother, and I will always love you, and I need nothing more. You're an angel. I'm not worthy of you. Only I'm afraid to deceive you. And Nikolai kissed her hand once more. This guy. Section 12. The ball at Ayagel's was the merriest in Moscow. Mothers said so, looking at their adolescents performing their just-learned pas. The adolescents and adolescents said so themselves, dancing until they dropped. Grown-up girls and young men said so, who came to these balls thinking they were condescending and found the best of merriment in them. That year, 2 matches were made at these balls. The 2 pretty Gorchakov princesses found fiancés and got married, and this added still more to the reputation of these balls. The particularity of these balls was that there was no host or hostess. There was the good-natured Ayagel, scraping the parquet by all the rules of art, flitting about like a bit of down, receiving tickets for lessons from his pupils. Another thing was that only those came to the balls who wanted to dance and be merry, the way 13 and 14-year-old girls do, who put on long gowns for the first time, and all of them, with rare exceptions, were or seemed pretty. So rapturously they smiled, so lit up with their eyes. Sometimes the best girl pupils even danced the pas de châle, and the best of them was Natasha, distinguished by her gracefulness. But at this last ball, only the Écossaise and the Anglaise were danced, and the mazurka, which was just coming into fashion. Ayagel rented the ballroom in Bezukov's house, and the ball was very successful. As everyone said, there were many pretty girls, and the Rostov girls were among the best. They were both especially happy and gay that evening. Sonia, proud of Dolikov's proposal, of her refusal, and of the talk with Nikolai, started twirling while she was still at home, not letting her maid do up her braids, and now she shone all through with impetuous joy. Natasha, no less proud of wearing a long gown for the first time, at a real ball, was still happier. The 2 girls wore white muslin gowns with pink ribbons. Natasha fell in love from the moment she entered the ballroom. She was not in love with anyone in particular, but with everyone. She fell in love with whomever she looked at, the moment she looked at him. Ah, how nice, she kept saying, running to Sonia. Nikolai and Denisov walked around the rooms, looking at the dancers benignly and patronizingly. How pretty she is, she'll be a beauty, said Denisov. Who? Countess Natasha, replied Denisov. And how well she dances. What grace, he said again, after some silence. Who are you talking about? Your sister, Denisov cried angrily. Rostov smiled. Mon cher comte, vous êtes un des les meilleurs écoliers. Il fait que vous dansez, said little Ayagel, coming over to Nikolai. Voyez combien de jolies demoiselles. He turned with the same request to Denisov, who was also his former pupil. Non, mon cher, je ferai tapisserie, said Denisov. Don't you remember what poor use I made of your lessons? Oh, no, Ayagel hastened to reassure him. You were merely inattentive, but you have the ability. Yes, you have the ability. They began to play the newly fashionable mazurka. Nikolai could not refuse Ayagel and asked Sonia to dance. Denisov sat down with the old ladies, and his elbow propped on his saber, his foot beating time, told some merry story and made the old ladies laugh, while glancing at the dancing young people. Ayagel danced the lead couple with Natasha, his pride and his best pupil. Moving his feet softly, delicately in his little boots, Ayagel flew down the ballroom with Natasha, who timidly but carefully performed her pas. Denisov's eyes were fixed on her, and he beat time with an air which said clearly he was not dancing himself, only because he did not want to, not because he could not. In the middle of a figure, he called out to Rostov, who just passed by. That's not it at all, he said. Is that a Polish mazurka? But she dances splendidly. Knowing that Denisov was famous even in Poland for his skill in dancing the Polish mazurka, Nikolai ran over to Natasha. Go and choose Denisov. You should see him dance. It's a wonder, he said. When Natasha's turn came again, she got up and stepped quickly in her beribboned little shoes. She timidly ran alone across the room to the corner where Denisov was sitting. She saw that everyone was looking at her and waiting. Nikolai saw that Denisov and Natasha were having a smiling argument and that Denisov was protesting, but smiling joyfully. He ran over. Please, Vasily Dmitrovich, said Natasha, please do. No, really, spare me, Countess, said Denisov. Enough now, Vasya, said Nikolai. He talks to me like Vaska the cat, Denisov said jokingly. I'll sing for you all evening, said Natasha. The Saul says she can do whatever she likes with me, said Denisov, and he unbuckled his saber. He came out from behind the chairs, took his lady firmly by the hand, threw back his head, and advanced his foot, waiting for the downbeat. Only on horseback and in the mazurka did Denisov's small stature not show, and he looked like the fine fellow he felt himself to be. On the downbeat, he gave his lady a victorious and jocular sidelong look, unexpectedly stamped his foot, bounced off the floor springingly like a ball, and flew along in a circle, drawing his lady after him. He flew inaudibly across half the room on one leg, and seemingly not to see the chairs that stood before him, raced straight for them. But suddenly, clanking his spurs and spreading his legs, he stopped on his heels, paused like that for a second, tapped his feet in place with a clanking of the spurs, spun quickly, then tapped his right ankle with his left foot, again flew along in a circle. Natasha intuitively guessed what he was about to do, and not knowing how herself, followed him, giving herself to him. Now he twirled her on his right arm, now his left. Now he fell on his knees and led her around him, then jumped up and sped on as precipitously as if he had intended to run through all the rooms without pausing for breath. Now he suddenly stopped again and performed a new and unexpected caper. When he swiftly twirled his lady in front of her seat and jingled his spurs before her as he bowed, Natasha did not even curtsy to him. She fixed her eyes on him in perplexity, smiling as though she did not recognize him. "What on earth is this?" she said. Even though Igel did not acknowledge this mazurka as authentic, everyone admired Denisov's skill, began choosing him constantly, and the old men, smiling, began to talk about Poland in the good old days. Denisov, flushed from the mazurka and wiping himself with a handkerchief, sat down by Natasha and did not leave her for the whole ball. And that is the end of today's reading. Well, that was just quite a tumult of things. Prince Andrei is not dead. He has a son. His wife has died in childbirth. How awful. Dolokhov lived and is in love with Sonia. Sonia's still in love with Nikolai, who's a bit of a little shit. And he's off flirting around with everybody. Even if he falls in love with her in the end, I'm not sure I'm going to condone it, because I don't know. Maybe it takes time. He's a young man, but I feel bad. She's so sweet. And I love Denisov and Natasha, because Natasha's just all like caper, and Denisov is just, seems like such a cool guy. Like a rough and tumble, but good-hearted guy. So, yeah, that's all for today. We'll pick up again tomorrow with chapter 13. And as I mentioned at the beginning, if there is, I think there might be a blackout day in support of Black Lives Matter protesters. If there is that, I will let you guys know, because I will not be reading. I will be having a media blackout in support of Black Lives Matter. So that's all. Stay safe out there, everybody. Stand with love and grace, and protect those around. Yeah, just be safe. There's a lot going on right now. Lots of love to everyone. Have a great day.